a.m. in New York City, 10 a.m. in London. Good morning, I'm Bonnie Quinn with your Bloomberg Brief. Let's get you set up for the day. Project Freedom on hold. President Trump puts his new Hormuz plans on pause while seeking a deal with Iran. The White House now reportedly believes a deal may be close. Marching higher, peace talk, hopes, and blowout tech earnings push global stocks higher. We have Disney results on deck today. And intervention speculation around the yen once again as the currency touches a 10-week high against the dollar. Let's take a look at these markets because we closed yesterday at records, not just for the S&P, but for the Nasdaq 100, the semiconductor index, and on and on. Even the small caps were at records. Just in the last few minutes, though, we've had breaking news from Axios that the White House believes that they're close to a deal on Iran, and they're waiting for an Iranian response within 48 hours. Now, according to this Axios report, the details of the deal would involve Iran not enriching uranium, a moratorium on uranium enrichment. The U.S. would release money that had been sanctioned, and there would be opening of the Strait of Hormuz on both sides. So several elements to the deal. This is the White House saying it believes a deal is close, but we are seeing oil move off the back of that. We have Brent crude all the way down to 103 plus change, New York crude at 95 and change. Now again, we had already been seeing some moves. Let's take a look at yields because they were already a little bit lower just off the back of the positive sentiment surrounding equities. Today we have the 10-year all the way back down to 434, so down almost 8 basis points right now. We have the dollar index also lower by about 0.7%, and that's partially why people think maybe there was intervention in Japan to take advantage a little bit of the weaker dollar. And look, the VIX below 17, so all calm out there. Let's get a roundup, though, of what's been happening around the world in the last few hours. We'll get to Justina Lee in London. Justina.
Good morning, Bonnie. Now, as you mentioned earlier, we have to start with the dollar yen. Now, it's a holiday in Japan today, but it feels like the authorities have been hard at work with suspected intervention, kind of resulting in this stronger yen today. Now, elsewhere in stock markets, it's all in the green today. And I have to draw your attention, especially to that staggering move in the Kospi, up 6.5%, Samsung Electronics joining the $1 trillion club. Now, if we flip the board here to Europe today, of course, it's also a bullish picture everywhere, with the Stocks Europe 600 up today, and generally a weaker dollar being reflected in a stronger euro today. And kind of with hopes for a peace deal in the Middle East, we're generally seeing bond yields lower today. And it will be especially notable in the gilt markets after that huge move up in yields yesterday. Now, of course, when it comes to the UK, it's not just about geopolitics. It's also about those local elections tomorrow, which we'll be watching with you here. Bonnie.
Justina, thank you so much. Justina Lee there in London. Let's get to some individual market movers now. Here's Natalia Knichevich.
Hi, Vanya. Shares of AMD are up by almost 19% in pre-market after they gained by 11% after the bell yesterday. The company reported strong results. Sales for the first quarter came up by 38%. Revenue from its data center division jumped by almost 60%. And the management also said that it's confident that the company will generate about tens of billions of dollars of revenue from its data center division next year. Now I'm also watching Super Micro. The company reported better than expected results on key metrics. The stock is up by 17% in pre-market. Reported adjusted margin that came at 10.1%. Analysts expected 6.75%. But the stock is still down on a year-to-date basis because remember, in March, it was accused, the management was accused of violating of U.S. export controls. And then finally, I'm watching shares of Arista. They are down by 8.9% in pre-market today, despite the fact that revenue and earnings came better than expected. However, sales forecast was in line with expectations, and Bloomberg Intelligence is saying maybe that's not good enough, Vani.
Natalia, thank you so much. Natalia Knichevich there. She'll be back later in the hour. Also coming up this hour, more on the strength of this earnings season with Keith Lerner of Truist. Back to breaking headlines, though, which is moving markets. Axios reporting that the U.S. is seeing an agreement potentially very soon with Iran on a memo of understanding to end the war and set the stage for more nuclear talks. Let's get more details now with Owner Ant in Dubai. So, Owner, we're getting all of these reports from Axios that the U.S. is potentially nearing an agreement with Iran on a memo of understanding. This is the US side we're hearing, though. Are we hearing anything from the Iranians or mediators that Iran is party to this?
Well, that's one of the key points to keep looking at in terms of what was just broken by Axios. They say that this memorandum of understanding that is currently under discussion needs to be approved by Iranian leadership, and that has proven to be tricky in previous rounds of discussions when the US thought that it was nearing an agreement, and that was widely telegraphed by President Trump himself. But we never came to a point where an agreement was actually clinched since the first round of direct talks between the two sides failed to yield an agreement when they met in Islamabad last month. What is different this time, though, is that the US expects a response from Iran on this comprehensive MOU, from the way it looks, within the next 48 hours. Whether or not it's going to happen, we don't know, but that's what's driving markets as we speak at the moment, with oil basically crashing.
Exactly. And President Trump has set deadlines before and then extended them, right? And it's not clear that the other party was even worried about those deadlines. Meantime, Abbas Araghchi is in China. And then all of the conditions that it seems are in this memorandum of understanding are things that we've seen before. So yes, the US would agree to release frozen funds, agree to lift sanctions, but also Iran would have to commit to a moratorium on enrichment and so on. Is there anything new about the details that we haven't seen?
Well, as you said, China's involvement can actually be a game changer, given the fact that Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping are expected to meet in China. And today was the first time we saw Chinese foreign minister so forcefully basically come into the picture and add his voice to the international community, calling for an end to the war. So that, in that sense, stars are kind of getting aligned for the two sides to come to an agreement. But when we look at the early indications of what that agreement might look like, it really focuses on three things that we've been talking about since this war began in February. And that is the reopening of Hormuz, which is obviously very, very important to both sides, as well as the rest of the international community. The limits on Iran's nuclear enrichment, nuclear facilities, nuclear program, that has been at the heart of the demands made by the US and has long been portrayed as one of the main reasons that the US went into this war, along with Israel, on Iran 2 months ago. And finally, the lifting of sanctions and unfreezing some funds for the Iranian government to access. Those are going to be the main issues that the two sides will start discussing in over a matter of 4 weeks, 30 days, if they can agree on the memorandum of understanding that we're talking about right now over the next 48 hours, Vonnie.
And this, of course, all coming after the U-turn on Project Freedom. Owners, thank you so much. That is Bloomberg's owner and in Dubai. Tech also pushing stocks higher. AMD shares leading the rally in pre-market trading after delivering a sales forecast that beat estimates by almost $1 billion. The leading challenger to NVIDIA's AI computing chips says a flood of data center spending will generate $11.2 billion in revenue in the second quarter. Joining us now is Matt Bloxham of Bloomberg Intelligence. Matt, is all this thanks to the extra $125 billion or so that we are seeing hyperscalers promise to spend this year?
I think that's certainly part of the story, but I think there's some other things going on here too. The first is that a lot of companies are looking to diversify the supply of AI accelerator chips beyond NVIDIA, which is obviously by far and away the market leader. Obviously, we've seen the likes of kind of Google and Amazon entering that space too. The second is that the technology is shifting away just from AI accelerators, or it used to be called GPUs, into more of the kind of classic CPU or kind of general purpose compute processing. And that's happening as the AI story shifts away from being heavily training oriented to more inferencing or kind of deployment of AI into kind of real life enterprise applications. And so they're kind of getting this kind of dual benefit of both taking market share in AI accelerators and seeing more demand for their kind of classic CPU products too.
So taking some of the pie, but also the pie is growing, I guess. What about Super Micro? Is it over all of its difficulties now?
It's a good question. It was a mixed print. So it's interesting to see the shares up so much, and it kind of shows you a couple of things the market's trying to struggle with. One was that the revenue for the quarter and the revenue guide was kind of fairly weak, and it kind of shows that perhaps there's still some kind of bumps in the road for them that they need to kind of navigate. But we saw this very positive surprise on gross margin, which has been enough to kind of compensate for that kind of rather muted revenue outlook. And that's obviously something the market has been looking for with all of the kind of supply shocks we're seeing across the tech space, particularly on components, that actually they're managing profitability to a much higher level than the market was expecting.
All right, Matt, thank you so much. Matt Bloxham there of Bloomberg Intelligence. The yen had strengthened against the dollar to the strongest level in more than 2 months. It was trading at a 155 handle, right now at 156.07. It all sparked speculation. Japanese officials may have stepped in again to intervene. Let's bring in Bloomberg M Live's David Savage. David, did that happen? Obviously, the Japanese authorities are not commenting, at least yet.
Yeah, good morning, Vonnie. I think traders here in Asia have been very much on the lookout for follow-on intervention. We've had a lot of holidays. Japan markets closed again today, which provided a really attractive thin liquidity window for further intervention. And the action we saw today was very similar to what we've seen over the last week, where a sort of knee-jerk jump higher for the yen fades pretty quickly as there seems to be quite a bit of fundamental support behind higher dollar yen. But certainly the drop we've seen in oil is providing another boost for the yen.
Absolutely. So traders may try to chase this higher. How many more times can the Bank of Japan intervene? It's capped at a certain number of times, right, before it can't call itself a freely floating currency anymore.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the goal, is certainly to introduce two-way risk on dollar yen. And to that extent, I think authorities have, given if they have intervened, have been successful. And we saw in 2024 authorities, supposedly spend, upwards of $100 billion. And so, again, I think in the very near term, I think traders are going to be cautious about pushing dollar yen too much higher. But in the medium term, I think it's going to be a challenge because the yen is being pressured by external factors, namely trending higher oil prices, which today is working in the favor of the yen as oil prices come off, but also that the BOJ has been reticent to normalize policy rates and was thought to be behind the curve on inflation prior to the conflict. And so that interest rate differential is also really working against the yen as well. Yeah,
perhaps the monetary authorities are buying time for now. David, thank you so much. David Savage there. Now to other top stories trending on the terminal this morning. Novo Nordisk's new Wegovy obesity pill fueled sales in the first quarter. The struggling drug maker also said the worst profit and sales drop will likely be 12% this year instead of 13% as earlier forecast. Novo is slashing prices and relying on the new pill to put it back in the race with rival Eli Lilly. Samsung's market cap tops $1 trillion. Shares of the world's largest memory maker more than quadrupled over the past year on strong demand for chips used in AI. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and UAE President Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed held a rare phone call after Iran attacked the Emirates on Monday. According to the state news agency, Netanyahu expressed support for all measures it takes to safeguard security. The call showed deepening ties between the countries. The UAE is one of only a few Arab countries to formally recognize Israel. Coming up, we'll bring you part of our conversation with Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla next. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Brief. I'm Vonnie Quinn in New York. Pfizer's first quarter sales beat estimates, and that helped offset a decline in revenue from COVID products. CEO Albert Bourla spoke to Bloomberg's David Weston on how AI is going to change the drug maker.
AI will change the way that we do things. And as a result, because of this big disruption, we'll create a new list of winners and losers. And those that they will be able to transform themselves by using AI will be on the top of the list. And those that they will not will go in the bottom. Pfizer wants to be on the very, very top of this list.
One of the challenges for the CEO of such a big and complex company as Pfizer is you have to do more than one thing at a time. And I don't mean just develop more than one pharmaceutical at a time. You have to really manage the costs at the same time you're investing in the R&D and the development. How are you coming on that front?
You're right that you need to multitask if you are a CEO, and you mentioned some of the things that R&D, which is my passion, and I want to work with my scientists to understand what we can do. Of course, to control the cost, but we have to do also politics, if you are asking me. So I was spending more time in Washington than with my R&D people the whole last year and this year in the beginning. So. You need to be able to multitask, and as long as you have a good compass, a North Star, you know where the organization should go, and you select the right people that they can take you there, you are okay.
You do spend some time in Washington, as I understand it, and part of that, I suspect, is with the FDA, Mr. McCary, and there are a lot of reporting about Mr. McCary. I'm not going to ask about that specifically, but how has the FDA been for you? They were going to revolutionize the way they approve new medicines. Are you seeing that in practical effect?
I don't see it yet, but I wouldn't expect to see it also in such a short period of time. I'm very encouraged with the comments that they made. Martin McCary made some comments recently about how he plans to modernize FDA so that we can accelerate drug development, because China has already eaten our lunch. I have seen Dr. Oz speaking about how we can make HHS much more productive. So I'm encouraged by that. We haven't seen it yet, but I'm encouraged that they are thinking in the right direction.
There's been some back and forth, at least for those of us on the outside of the FDA, about the schedule for vaccinations for COVID. Has that affected your sales?
Yeah, it was mostly on the CDC, the schedule. There was some variation that FDA asked us to do on COVID, which we did, although we disagree scientifically there was any merit to do it, but we did it because they are FDA. CDC was a very painful story, I think, and they did things that hurt the credibility of this renowned institution. Things that forced, for example, the American Academy of Pediatricians to start issuing their own guidelines because they wouldn't trust anymore the guidelines of the CDC. Again, I think we have now a turnaround there. The new director that was appointed is a very credible scientist, has a lot of credentials, and I'm optimistic that all these bad things that we saw in the vaccines are in the past.
You also have been developing a vaccine for Lyme disease, as I understand it. Where does that stand? You need more data.
I think we are going to, with the data that we have right now, that was more than 3 years study, so we have a lot of data. And we are going to submit, and we will see how regulators will respond, but probably I'm encouraged that we will get it approved. This is a disease that is devastating. There is no vaccines right now, and the incidence is growing. There are 600,000 cases of Lyme disease every year, and the long-term consequences in the health of the people that are getting the disease are really enormous. So I'm optimistic that we have something good for the patients here.
Let's go international for a moment. I know that you've entered into agreements with some Chinese firms, both this year and I believe last year as well. Describe those agreements and what they do for Pfizer.
We have done several agreements. Most of them are in licensing, which means that technology and innovation that they have developed, that's very early stage, that we found promising. We license these technologies and we are developing it ourselves, not in China, but in the US.
Pfizer CEO Albert Bourla there speaking with Bloomberg's David Weston. Coming up, Indiana primary results show Trump's influence remains strong. A look at that and what else is making headlines in your front page news next. This is Bloomberg. Time now for your front page news. First up, the Financial Times reporting DeepSeek is nearing a valuation of $45 billion. The FT saying China's main chip sector investment fund is in discussions to lead a fundraising round at that valuation. Next up, the Wall Street Journal leading with the Indiana primaries and how results are showing President Trump's grip on the Republican base. The president scored decisive victories in a slate of state Senate primaries, with 5 of the 7 Trump-backed challengers winning. And finally, the Washington Post is reporting the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission has sued the New York Times, alleging it violated federal law by passing over a white male employee for a promotion. A spokesperson for the New York Times said it categorically rejects the meritless and politically motivated allegations. I want to take a look at a chart of Brent. Look at where we fell off just about 25 minutes ago, down about 6% now, just under $103 a barrel. This after Axios reported that the White House is saying it's nearing a one-page memorandum of understanding with Iran, but it is waiting for an Iranian response within the next 48 hours. Some of the details of that memorandum of understanding, according to the White House, include a moratorium on uranium enrichment on the part of Iran, the releasing of frozen funds on the part of the US, and also a reopening of the Strait of Hormuz on both sides. Certainly the oil market is reacting. Coming up, we'll be speaking with Keith Lerner of Truist. It's 5:30 a.m. in New York City, 10:30 a.m. in London. Good morning, I'm Bonnie Quinn with your Bloomberg Brief. Let's get you set up for the day. Project Freedom on hold. President Trump puts his new Hormuz plans on pause while seeking a deal with Iran. In the last half hour, the White House says it reportedly believes a deal is close, according to Axios. Marching higher, peace talk hopes and blowout tech earnings push global stocks higher. Disney results on deck. And prices at the pump top $4.50 a gallon. That's for the first time since July of 2022. Let's get to these markets then, because as I said a half hour ago, Axios came out with a report that the White House believes it's getting close to an agreement with Iran. It would be a one-page memorandum of understanding to set the framework for more detailed nuclear negotiations and end the current war. That said, the White House is looking for a response from Iran within 48 hours, so it's not clear what's happening on the Iranian side of things. The deal would involve Iran committing to a moratorium on nuclear enrichment, the US agreeing to lift sanctions, release billions in frozen funds, and both sides lifting Hormuz restrictions. As you can see, the market reaction was immediate. Brent crude down to 103 and change. WTI down to 95 and change. Futures, that might be a little bit of a different story. We already hit records all day yesterday, and really we were higher on every sector in the S&P 500. Let's take a look at yields as well, because they are plunging today. We had the 30-year right back down, the 10-year down more than 7 basis points to 435. Weakness to the dollar, and that VIX index trading with a 16 handle. We're going to analyze all of that in just a moment. Let's get to some individual movers first, though. Here's Natalia Knichevich.
Hi, Vani. Occidental Petroleum reported better than expected results yesterday. The company also reduced its debt to $13.3 billion, moving closer to its goal of $10 billion. But the stock is down, just like other energy stocks today, on hopes of U.S.-Iran peace deal. Now let's move to the technology space. Shares of AMD are up by 17% today. The company reported stronger than expected results. Yesterday, we saw that data center revenue came up by almost 60%, and the company management is confident that the company will keep providing stronger than expected data center revenue next year as well. Super Micro shares are up by almost 17%. Also, results came better than expected. Specifically, margins were really strong. And then in the healthcare space, shares of Novo Nordisk today are up by 6%. The company also posted better than expected results, saying that its obesity pill drove sales in the first quarter. And the management also said that this year's declines won't be as bad as expected, Vani.
Natalia, thank you so much. That's Natalia Knichevich. Joining us now is Keith Lerner, CIO and Chief Market Strategist of Truist. Keith, I think it's going to be a pretty volatile day. Would you be comfortable getting into this market today, given what we know, an Axios report based on reporting that the White House thinks we're close to some kind of an agreement with Iran?
Yeah, well, great to be with you. And to answer your question directly, yes, we still think this bull market has earned the benefit of the doubt, and it's not going to necessarily be a straight line like it has been more recently, but we still think ultimately this bull market has further to go. And, in general, the market in our view had already, really kind of sniffed out that we had moved past the peak of uncertainty. Normally markets bottom not when there's full clarity, but just as you move past that peak of uncertainty, which was, over a month ago now. And then I guess just on the news today, I mean, on the margin, this does show you with oil prices coming down that there was still some concern embedded in those oil markets. So in some ways, this move down in oil prices is providing some additional fuel for the market. Now, if we get a headline that goes the other way, we could certainly see kind of the opposite reaction. But I think all in all, the tech story is actually the biggest story for this market.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one more item, though, on the breaking news first, if you don't mind, and that is that, you mentioned we could see a reversal. And, I mean, it's true, right? President Trump has tried a lot of things to get the U.S. out of the Strait of Hormuz problem. Maybe this is just the latest, and if that's the case, then would we see a really violent reversal of all the moves we're seeing?
I mean, it's absolutely, a risk. But I think in general, based on what we've seen over the last year, especially after that terrorist shock, I think the road is towards some type of agreement. And we're getting closer. It can be messy. It may not be straightforward. But, again, I think that you really have to look also beyond just these headlines that, we're having a profits boom away from this story. So if we had a pullback as a result of maybe a headline that was more disruptive or saying that we're not towards an agreement, I think investors pretty quickly would be looking at that as an opportunity to add to longs.
Well, as you say, Keith, semis at records, obviously the NASDAQ 100 and so on at records. How did we go from talking about bubbles and the potential for something to burst right before the war started to now where everyone seems comfortable with these valuations?
Yeah, and we never really bought into the bubble talk for technology. If we look back historically, I mean, in the 2000 peak, the technology sector had a PE of over 50. Last October, when we had a short-term peak in the technology sector, the peak was around 32. And even as we're looking today, I mean, because since October of last year, when the technology sector peaked, we're only up about 5% from that peak. Now, we're up a lot from the lows, but that's because we had a big sell-off. At the same time, what's really notable, Vonnie, is that from that peak of last October, the valuation for the tech sector is actually down from that 32 multiple down to about 24. And you say, why is that? Well, earning trends have been revised up at a really rapid pace. Now, listen, the semiconductor side is getting extremely hot. That rubber band is getting very stretched. There's a lot of hot money in there. But I would also say, here's one last stat on this, going back to that October period. The semiconductors, since that October peak, are up about 50%. The forward earning estimates are up double that, up 100%. So it is supported by earnings, but again, like the momentum is so strong one way right now. It's not necessarily. I would not necessarily be adding to semis today, but I do think tech remains leadership in this market.
So if you wouldn't be adding to semis necessarily, where would you be looking? Is there any discounted equity left in the space?
Yeah, listen, I think the broader tech story, maybe having more of the more diversified tech areas, so that way, if you see a little bit of pullback in semis, because I think still that's leadership. I just think, you're pretty extended short term. You're actually starting to see a little bit better action in software. I don't think software is leadership per se, but I think in general, I would still have maybe more broader technology, just not just on semiconductors. Small caps are also acting very well. What's notable about small caps, though, what's driving that, especially the S&P 600, is industrials. Small cap tech is actually up over 30% this year, and energy is doing well. So that's another area we like. The average stock or the equal weighted index actually isn't at a new high yet. So that's another area, trading around the median historical PE. And then, emerging markets are another area that we still like as well. So there's certainly other areas within this market, and it is, as far as the earnings side, pretty broad based.
Keith, can I ask you about this SEC proposal for companies to go to twice yearly reporting as opposed to 4 times? Would you be comfortable with that?
as an analyst that crunches a lot of data, I prefer more data to less. But from a market perspective, I think we'll be fine. I think what will happen is that some companies will report and keep it at a quarterly cadence, and other companies will not. And if you really zoom out a bit, if you look at an S&P chart and overlay that with forward earning estimates, ultimately markets will still move with earnings over time. But I think what can happen is if you have less guidance, you may have more drastic reactions when those earning reports come out if it's only twice a year. So again, I don't think it necessarily changes the long term. In the short term, I think it may cause more volatility because you just have less ongoing communication, as a whole.
All right, Keith, thank you so much for your time this morning. We really appreciate it. That's Keith Lerner of Truist. Now to other top stories trending on the terminal this morning. The SEC then unveiling a plan that would allow U.S. companies to report earnings semi-annually rather than quarterly. The move would reduce the amount of information publicly traded firms have to share with investors. Critics of the plan argue there is the potential for companies to bury bad news and that less frequent reports could increase the risk of insider trading. American Electric Power is threatening to remove itself from two of the U.S.'s biggest electricity grids over the length of time it takes to connect AI data centers. Frustrations over PJM interconnection, the largest regional grid in the U.S., in fact, are growing as wholesale electricity costs climb and reforms to serve AI demand move too slowly. Citadel CEO Ken Griffin doubling down on Miami. Griffin says he plans to make Citadel's Miami tower even bigger now in the face of his feud with New York City Mayor Zoran Mamdani. Speaking at the Milken conference, Griffin said Mamdani is triggering the trauma he went through in Chicago. Coming up, inching closer to a deal, the U.S. and Iran are reportedly working on that one-page memorandum of understanding to end the war. More on that next. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Brief. I'm Bonnie Quinn in New York. So, fresh peace talk optimism brewing as the White House says it believes it's close to an agreement with Iran to end the near 10-week war. This all according to a report in Axios. Bloomberg Government's Kate Ackley joins us from Washington. Kate, is it fair to say that we're hearing from the White House on this, but we really don't know who the White House is talking to or who's putting this together?
Right. And I mean, this sort of ties in with what we were hearing earlier this week about Trump's decision to suspend Operation Project Freedom, which was, where the U.S. was going to guide ships through the Strait of Hormuz, which is that very crucial pathway for oil and gas and a lot of other items. So it does indicate that Trump's trying to find a way to end this war. It's increasingly unpopular. We've seen it cause a rise in gas prices, and that obviously has political implications as well. Prices up to $4.50 a gallon is the latest news.
Yeah, I mean, the president won't want that sustained, right? And obviously the market is believing that this is leading to something, in terms of a memorandum of understanding, but that could all reverse very fast as well. But the president really has to do something about these gas prices, doesn't he?
Right. I mean, that's part of the reason why I think the Trump administration really is seeking an end to this. And again, it's increasingly unpopular in the public polling. That isn't good for, the midterm elections that are on the horizon for the Republican side.
So I want to talk a little bit about the elections and the primaries. Kate, Vivek Ramaswamy won the Republican nomination in Ohio. What do we think is going to happen in Ohio later this year? Is it potentially flipping back towards the Democrats, or are the Republicans digging in, on MAGA policies?
Well, in terms of, Ohio hasn't had a Democratic governor elected for, a couple of decades. But there are some indications, some of the political prognosticators moved that Ramaswamy will face off Democrat Amy Acton. So, there is a sign that could be competitive. In the Senate race, you've got Sherrod Brown there on the screen. Former Senator Sherrod Brown seeking to make a comeback. It's official. He, won his primary last night. He will face sitting Senator John Husted. that could be also a competitive race. We have, basically 6 months to go before Election Day. So that's sort of an eternity in our political cycles anymore. But I think it will certainly be a race that draws huge amounts of money, political money, outside money. We expect, big industry PACs could be involved in that race. And certainly a lot of attention, a lot of national attention will be on that Ohio Senate race.
That's for sure. Kate, thank you so much. That is Bloomberg Government's Kate Ackley. Turning to tech, Alphabet outperforming other Mag 7 stocks in the pre-market as the information reports on a deal with Anthropic. Let's bring in the host of Bloomberg Tech Europe, Tom McKenzie. So, another day, more Anthropic news. Tom, what's it today?
Yeah, and more co-investment. So this is the news from the information, as you said, that potentially a $200 billion worth of spend from Anthropic on Google and Alphabet's cloud services business over the next 5 years, which really has been seen by the markets as a validation of a cloud business at Google, an infrastructure business when it comes to its ability to support and power AI, and arguably its chips as well. And don't forget, Google has its TPUs, its own chips, which are increasingly in demand, particularly for the inference. So actually when we use AI. So it's a validation across all those metrics on this reporting. And so Alphabet getting a bit of a lift on that. Of course, Alphabet and Google in terms of the cloud business competes notably, of course, with Microsoft, but top of the list is really Amazon and what they're seeing in terms of AWS. So for many investors, this is validation that Google is very much in the race and is positioning itself in a strong role to kind of capitalize on those AI demands over a longer period of time with that potentially $200 billion worth of commitment from Anthropic.
Tom, last night, obviously, with AMD earnings, a blockbuster forecast. I think it took the market a little bit by surprise. It seems AMD is able to take a little bit more market share from NVIDIA potentially and even grow that pie.
Well, it's taking market share from Intel as well. It's taking market share from a number of competitors. It was a beat in the quarter. It was a beat in terms of the forecast for the current quarter. Yes, they have the GPU play, to which NVIDIA still dominates in terms of its production and demand for its own chips for AI accelerators. But to your point, AMD is increasingly carving out market share there, but also on microprocessors that go into data centers and CPUs. Again, part of that inference story. And again, AMD is seeing strong demand on that front. Just one stat that jumped out to me was the data center part of the business, which really speaks to those GPUs, that demand for AI accelerators. They saw growth there in terms of revenues of 57% year on year. So that just shows the strength that's coming through. And again, a reminder that AMD is well positioned as the hyperscalers commit to spend possibly $725 billion on CapEx through 2026.
Yeah, way more than we had expected. What about Super Micro, Tom? It seemed for a time that it just had trouble after trouble after trouble, but that might be starting to be behind it now?
Yeah, they've had some accounting issues they've had to wrestle with. They've had US prosecutors taking aim at one of the co-founders for apparent alleged shipments of some of these server racks to China. Not that legal case targeting the company specifically, but one of the co-founders. So yes, you're right, they've had to wrestle with a few issues. The earnings will provide some relief to investors in Super Micro that provides these servers. The margin was healthier, and it suggests that they're getting a control of costs as they try and ship and meet the demand that they're seeing for their customers and clients.
Tom, thank you so much. That is Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie. And do check out the next episode of Bloomberg Tech Europe, where Tom explores the battle between Waymo and Wave. That's out Friday, May 8th. Sticking with earnings, Disney is set to report before the bell its first batch of earnings under new CEO Josh D'Amaro. Geetha Ranganathan of Bloomberg Intelligence joins us now. Geetha, sentiment is a little muted around Disney. What will Josh have to tell us? I mean, he's obviously seen a few setbacks since he took over just not even 2 months ago.
Yeah, Bonnie, good morning. So it's all about the narrative, as you just pointed out, and sentiment has been a little bit muted. So I think it really is incumbent upon this new CEO to kind of reset the narrative a little bit. So we know that he has obviously been in charge of the parks division, but I think people are really looking for more color in terms of entertainment, in terms of streaming, and if they can really get that streaming growth kind of fired up, at least in terms of profitability. They've done a pretty good job so far, but it's really about setting more ambitious targets and seeing exactly what roadmap Josh D'Amaro has for the company.
So we'll essentially be looking for subscriber growth for Disney Plus, Hulu, and the fact that they're not spinning off ESPN now as well, I suppose, would add to that. And then I guess there's parks. Should that be good news as well? Is there the potential for a beat in any of these areas?
So I'm not really sure about a beat in the fiscal second quarter, which they'll be reporting shortly. It's really more about the guidance tone that they set for the rest of the year. So we already know that the quarter that they're going to be reporting, Parks is going to be a little bit light. That's because of a lot of pre-opening costs that they had to undertake for some of the new cruise ships that they're launching, the World of Frozen in Disneyland Paris. So there's a lot of that going on. And plus, we've seen some softer attendance trends. I think really what investors are going to be focused on is whether this is going to continue to be a second half pickup story, because that's what Disney has been telling us all along. But all of these new geopolitical tensions, gas prices, as you had pointed out, is that really going to force them to take their guidance down a little bit? And that will be pretty damaging, I think, to the Disney narrative, at least for the rest of fiscal 2026.
Yeah, great question. Will subscriptions go if gas prices stay this high? What about the early review of the Disney-owned and operated ABC stations? Is that going to trickle down to the bottom line in any way? Will Josh even get a question about it? I'm sure he will.
Yeah, I think, it's kind of a little bit of a PR nightmare for Josh. I mean, just kind of coming into the role. But it's not like Disney hasn't dealt with this before. Obviously, they had that whole blow up last September as well. In terms of financial impact itself, the ABC stations contribute less than, 2.5% of revenue of the entire company. I mean, this is a company that brings in about $100 billion in revenue. Financially, not a great impact, but obviously, yes, from a PR standpoint, headline risk, yes, it does have, quite a bit of implications from that perspective.
Geeta, amazing. Thank you so much. Looking forward to those earnings. Now that we have the background, Geeta Ranganathan of Bloomberg Intelligence there. Coming up, more earnings and Fed speak in your day ahead. That's next. This is Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Brief. I'm Bonnie Quinn in New York. Now a look at what's ahead today. Earnings from Disney, Uber, Kraft Heinz all reporting before the bell. Warner Brothers and Snap among those reporting after the market close. That U.S. Treasury Department quarterly refunding announcement comes at 8:30 a.m. New York time. Plus we get Fed speak from Alberto Musalem at 9:30 Eastern, Austin Goolsbee at 1 p.m. Eastern. This is going to be the story today, though, this macro environment. Look at Brent crude trading below $102 a barrel. This on an Axios report that the U.S. is saying there's a one-page memorandum of understanding out there with all sorts of conditions that Iran has 48 hours to agree to, in which case that would set the stage for an immediate end to the immediate conflict and longer nuclear negotiations. Unclear what Iran thinks of this or how much Iran has been involved in the process, but it would involve things like unsticking frozen funds, taking off sanctions, both sides allowing the strait to reopen, and a moratorium on nuclear enrichment. This all, again, is according to the White House via an Axios report. Futures powering higher after setting records yesterday across the indices. That's it for Bloomberg Brief.